Modeling is arguably the most fundamental part of CGI, and this is where pretty much everybody starts. And due to it being the most straightforward job, this is where pretty much everybody stays. As a result, there are way too many modelers out there, despite not much of a demand for them. So if you look into doing CGI, make sure you go one step beyond, because, you will end up having to make YouTube videos for those who know even less about it than you. In today's video, we will be taking a look at how 3D models are created, the industry standard software used, and how an asset is prepared for the next steps, such as texturing and animating. This is the program generally used for CGI in films, Maya, and she is a magical but extremely temperamental software. It can make you happy and fill you with joy, but even more so, it can make you scream, cry and pull your hair out. It being a very complex software, it just loves to crash, fail, freeze, break and generally make you lose your work and mind. If this weren't the case, then Avatar 2 would have actually been released in 2014 as intended. You can do pretty much everything CGI related in Maya, and as such, basically all VFX houses use it. But as with all programs, it has its strengths and weaknesses. Its strengths being modeling, animating and rendering. And weaknesses being pretty much everything else? Personally, I wouldn't simulate a drop of water in Maya, but I will talk about that later. Okay, let's get started. This is my 3D workspace, where all the magic will happen. As I am recreating an existing model, I first bring in some reference images I found on Google. Yes, I said Google, not comics. I'm a film guy, get used to it. I set up the image planes on the three main views and align them to the center. Well, more or less. And move them out of the way. Once I'm done with that, I can just model over these. And that way, I get the exact shape I need. Again, more or less. Now let's talk about actual modeling. In the top left, you can see the primitive shapes I can add to the scene. That's primitive as in basic, not as in eating with hands and being scared of fire. And they tend to be the basis for everything. I added a cube to the scene, then used a variety of modeling tools to modify the vertices, add, shape or delete faces and edges, and generally mess about. Because Mjolnir is like super symmetrical, it is enough to create just one corner of it, then duplicate special around, and then reassemble the geometry. This technique is used a lot, as it can vastly reduce the workload and can ensure that symmetrical things are, symmetrical. There we go, all back together. A thing about modeling, especially in Maya, is that angons are a no-no, meaning that faces with more than 4 sides can cause you physical pain, so you should really avoid them. Triangles are not your friends either, so quads are what you aim for. It is important for edge flow, rendering, and other reasons as well. Another thing is sharp edges. Nothing in real life is as sharp as a perfect angle in 3D, so we always have to bevel the edges. Otherwise, the super sharp break in light reflection will immediately give away the fakery. Lastly, I added the 2 circular shapes. Circles in squares, and especially squares in circles, are a tricky thing in modeling, because smoothing happens sort of automatically, so your topology has to be really good to keep things neat when you subdivide. And voila! A hammerhead! It's done! And don't even mention the weird little indentation at the bottom. Time for the handle, for which I use a cylinder to begin with. And just like with the head, I select, extract, move and reshape. To ensure that the gold rings are equally spaced, I can insert multiple edge loops at once, bevel, extrude, and clearly mess something up in this very simple process. But I solved it! Again, important to bevel, so I took the time to select the edge loops one by one and do just that. And that's it! Modeling done! Simple as that! Yeah, right. However, we are not done yet. There is one more stage called UV mapping, and we need to do that for texturing. When modeling, we are working in X, Y, Z space, and when we are done with that, we unfold the 3D model into 2D UV space, so we can apply a 2D image to it, which will correspond to the 3D coordinates on the model. Essentially, we slice up and flatten out the model, and the faces in 2D will represent the faces in 3D, so when we add an image in the 2D area, it will color the same faces on the 3D model. Wow, that was a lot of 2D and 3D thrown at you, but hopefully you get the point. If not, well, I guess you have no choice but to watch the next video where I will texture Mjolnir and show it all visually. I am using the cut and saw tool to cut up the model as if it were a piece of paper that I want to flatten out. And now, I'm using 110% of my brain's capacity to figure out what on earth is going on here. But I very quickly gave up and moved on. Yay, the professional! This is the actual UV space. The challenge is to lay out all these UV shells into one of these squares, using as much of the available space as possible. We need that because the bigger the shells are, the higher the resolution of the image applied to it is. Obviously, if you use 50% of the space of a 2K image, then we really only have 1K resolution. That checker pattern shows me that the shells are nice and optimal and not distorted, in which case the squares will stretch all over the place. Additionally, you should lay out the shells in a way that similar materials are grouped together, so that when you create the textures, it will be a bit easier to add masks. Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to understand any of that. I will cover that in the next video. With a mask? Haha! A bad joke that you don't even understand yet. Just a heads up for all you nitpicky people out there, I am aware that I wasn't particularly efficient with my UV layout, as I just wanted to get it over and done with. But later on, the perfectionist got the better of me, and I ended up going back and do the whole thing again anyway. And ta-da! We're done! Thor's hammer well and truly modeled with good topology, good edge flow, and nice UV layout. Well, it can always be a bit better, but it will work. In the next video, we will cover texturing, so we will create the colors and materials as well as a simple shader network. Well, I will do all those things, you will be just sat there watching. Speaking of, your view is truly appreciated. If you like this video, then please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing so you can keep up to date with the new uploads. Thank you for watching, you've been amazing, have a great day and see you later!